Yeah, of course. He's got a week off, hasn't he?
Yeah, before he goes to Vegas. Hello and welcome to the very first Boxing Social live show as we react to last night's stunning win for Oleksandr Usyk against Anthony Joshua at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everybody to please subscribe, follow, turn those notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, I am delighted to be joined by a very esteemed panel of guests. So we're going to go around. We've, of course, got Andy Clarke of Sky Sports, Declan Taylor, who does stuff.
Unemployed
at the minute. Available for hire, gun for hire, Deck Taylor. And Ade Oladipo's got so many jobs that we'll waste all of our time if we list all of them. Right, guys, obviously we're going to start at the main event last night. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and just ask for your kind of initial thoughts, really. So, Andy, I'm going to start with you. Stunning win for Oleksandr Usyk last night.
It was, and you always have to give props to the winner. You should always concentrate on what the winner did, not what the loser didn't do, and it was a comprehensive victory. I wasn't in any doubt at the end, or I didn't have any fears at the end that it might go the wrong way with the judges. It was easy to score. I thought there were a couple of quite close rounds in there, but generally speaking, it was easy to score, and he just never really got into the fight. Usyk just had too much for him from the beginning and continued that right through to the end. He put his foot down in those final 4 rounds when he really needed to, just to make absolutely sure that there wasn't any doubt in any judge's mind. And it was hugely impressive, hugely impressive. I mean, we knew going into it that he was a master craftsman, but people were talking about the size difference. We obsess about heavyweights' weights because we can, I suppose, really. But he made light of it. He was in control really all the way through the fight. And it was a joy to watch. It was a massive privilege to be there, and I found it absorbing every single second of it. There's no shame in it for Joshua. He ran into an exceptional fighter last night who was just better than him. And unfortunately, I think he always will be better than him. He will take the rematch because that's what they do. But I can't see him winning it.
Deck, your initial thoughts from last night?
Basically that. First and foremost, I'm quite disappointed you promised us shaving in a Usyk moustache, and you haven't. That was literally one thing you said last night, so I got disappointed in that. Other than that, on the fight...
It's always good to start with a rep.
Yeah, just get that established now. But on the fight, I think it was a fight worthy of shaving any sort of facial hair into anyone's face. It was, the performance was like Andy sort of alluded to there, we were kind of expecting it. A lot of people were expecting it, but to see it unfold like that, I personally thought Joshua was going to win. I thought he was going to be too big. Good big and beats a good little and all that. He's exceptional. It's generational talent. And just watching it unfold in front of you is quite incredible. And I feel like no other sport does that. There's a lot of things to moan about in boxing, but when it comes to that condensed period window of brilliance, no other sport does it like that. And that was sensational. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be someone who goes, well, maybe, Joshua maybe has fallen short of that level, whatever. I think it was all about Usyk's brilliance last night. And yeah, I want to see him against Fury. It's the fight. That is the fight, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come on to that shortly. Ade, you came in last week. You've spoken about you spoke very openly about your fears and the amount of times that you'd played it over in your head and over and over and over again. It seemed to me, at least from speaking to you, that the closer the fight came, the more nervous you got as a self-confessed AJ fan. Yeah. Talk to me about last night. Brilliant.
Yeah, masterful. I think those are the words that have been repeated over and over again after watching Usyk last night. And just too good. Ultimately just too good. Sometimes we like to really try and make things a bit harder than they are. It's just boxing, and Usyk's just a lot better boxer than AJ, right? I mean, he's had nearly 10 times the amount of amateur fights that AJ's had, and he's just far too good on the night. And like Andy said, we make the weight thing a lot. We talk about it, right? What's AJ going to weigh on the scales? And if AJ's not going to use that weight in any way, shape or form, then it's not going to matter, is it? I mean, if he's just going to stand off and have a boxing match, then the better boxer's going to win. I think we all knew, right? Every single person you polled knew that Usyk's just a lot better boxer than AJ. And I try and dissect things from the first round. You look at the first round, remember the first round, I remember sitting next to someone, I think maybe Usyk landed or snapped AJ's head back with a left straight away. And I thought, my God, he's found his range already. And I say that because I remember speaking to Tony Bellew. And Tony Bellew, when we tried to watch the fight back, he was saying that Usyk was struggling to find his range because Tony was moving all over the place. Usyk found his range with Tony, maybe rounds 4 or 5. He started to kind of get that range. He found it with AJ in the first 40 seconds. And I was like, we have a problem here. If he's found his range already, unless AJ dents him, then we have a big problem. AJ wasn't able to dent him. So, look, AJ shouldn't be upset. I think it's one of those results where you look back in 10, 15 years and think, how's Usyk? And I think we will do that. I think Usyk's going to go on to have a couple of more really impressive wins, whether it be Wilder or the Fury fights happens or anyone else coming up. Dillian White potentially, who was there ringside. But I'm with Andy. I don't see what you can change with AJ to see how he gets the job done in 6 or 7 months' time. It's almost impossible. This isn't a Ruiz one. And Usyk's not going to come in 30 pounds, 40 pounds heavy like Ruiz did. This is the guy that lives for boxing. So it's difficult to see what next for AJ. There will be what next because he's the cash cow in the division. But I don't see how he goes through Usyk. For me, it's almost an impossible mission.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One of the things that I'd kind of thought going in was that we were going to see Oleksandr Usyk take those 2 or 3 rounds. I expected the foot pressure, I expected the movement, the head movement, the feints, giving Joshua different looks, but I didn't expect him to move his hands as much as he did in those first 3 rounds. You mentioned there about snapping the head back with a southpaw left hand. I think he landed 2 or 3 right on the button early on. And from then, AJ really struggled to catch up.
Yeah, 100%. I think the problem would have been in the preparation because as you're watching it, you think, how could you possibly prepare for this guy? You can get as much southpaw sparring, notoriously hard to get at any weight, let alone heavyweight. We know he had Wadi Camacho in, he had Dion Juma in. You need to get people in. You need to get southpaw, Thomas Carty. None of them like Usyk. All of them are going to be sparring Joshua thinking, this is Joshua in front of me, and they're going to be on the back foot the whole time. None of them are going to be able to do that. So as soon as Joshua's in there, that's the first glimpse he's had of anyone like this. How can you prepare for that? And then, no wonder he's getting caught straight away because straight away Usyk's right foot's on the outside, perfect position for the cross, and then it lands. And you think, I was expecting Usyk to start slowly. He started like a dream. I think you tweeted it. It was the dream start for him. That was what he needed to do. If he found himself 3 or 4 behind, or even a couple behind, Joshua could have maybe settled in and just boxed a bit more. But the way that he started made it impossible, and I think that's down to preparation, which does mean that Joshua, in theory, should be better in a rematch, better prepared in a rematch, just from what he learnt last night. Yeah. But I believe that Usyk's will have taken more from last night than Joshua will.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like Joshua could be better prepared for the rematch, but Usyk, I mean, I don't necessarily think he went in there with many doubts in his mind, but any kind of modicum of doubt in the back of his mind surely gone after last night. He's gone in there and executed, and as you mentioned, Andy, he pretty much dominated. I had him 4 rounds up after 4 rounds, and then I gave AJ the next couple of rounds, Usyk the 7th, which I thought was a really, really significant round to win to really stem that flow for Joshua, and then he never really looked back.
No, he didn't. He didn't. I gave Joshua rounds 5, 6, and 8. I very nearly gave him round 2. If I had, I would have had 116, 112. And Steve Weisfeld, who was sat right in front of me, that's what he had. And having had a quick peek at the scorecards this morning, he did give Joshua round 2, but there was no way I could have gone any more than 4 rounds in AJ's favour. And Usyk's he's one of these fighters where they'll prepare as best they can and put all of the work in, but ultimately he will be super confident that when the bell goes, whatever comes his way, he will figure it out.
Yeah.
And in the build-up to the fight, some people were saying, AJ's never seen anyone like Usyk, but Usyk's never been in with anyone like AJ. Not really true. He had 350 amateur fights at elite level at 91 kilos, and that kind of stand-up traditional boxing stance style in amateurs is very, very common, and he will have encountered that kind of style on numerous occasions. It won't have been anything that he would have felt he hadn't seen before, and you just can't really just overplay how good he was, because he keeps you turning and moving, and he's around you all the time like some kind of vortex, but he's always close enough to hit you.
Yeah.
He makes you miss, and then he makes you pay. He's always close enough to hit you. People would describe him as a kind of boxer and mover, and he does move really well, but it's economical stuff. You know, he's slipping punches by fractions. He's moving his feet just tiny amounts just to get them exactly where they need to be. And, you know, he's just a bit of a wizard, isn't he, really? And it's great to watch. It's brilliant for the division. And they were so confident all week. Speaking to Egis, Klimas and Alex Krasyuk and anyone around Team Usyk, they were just They just oozed it. And when you do this for long enough, you get to know, don't you? You get to kind of like sniff real confidence.
Yeah, not
and
arrogance.
It
just
smells
confidence.
different, doesn't it, to boisterous self-belief.
Yeah,
And it was real confidence.
We had Shane McGuigan in here, who obviously, of course, was a part of the bubble with Lawrence Okoli, and he said, he's been around the sport for a long time, obviously for his dad as well, and he said that, sometimes the fighter will be 100% confident, but you'll have the manager running around or one of the training team who's on edge all week and he's got a problem with the gloves, the ring size, the this, that. He said there was absolutely none of that all week from the Ukrainians, Egis Klimas, Alex Krasiuk. They were all cool as a cucumber, and you can see why after we saw what happened last night.
Yeah, look, ultimately, just too good. I mean, we can try and break it down, and we will break it down, but far too good. And it's just about making adjustments as well. Even if AJ did do something, everyone was like, okay, steamroll him, try and dent him. I still think Usyk would have made adjustments. I just think he's that kind of fighter. I was watching his fight back against Bradis, and that was a tough fight for Usyk, but he made adjustments. In the later rounds, he kind of knew what to do. In the Gassiev fight, Gassiev landed a couple of big shots, made adjustments. Just too experienced. I thought the atmosphere might dent him. It almost gave him, I think the booing of the Ukrainian national anthem pissed him off.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that almost made him, okay, you want to boo the national...
It was like a Mayweather Hatton moment.
Honestly, it was that, wasn't it? It was like,
totally.
You really want to do that? You want to boo Vitali? Okay, I'm on my way out.
It's never going to bother him, is it?
Never.
It's just interesting as well when you mention Mayweather and that. You remember back in the day when people decided they'd come up with the blueprint to beat Mayweather, even though nobody had done it, which was to step to him and rough him up and make it uncomfortable. People are going to say that now. I heard it in the aftermath of the fight last night. You need to put the pressure on. You need to do this. It's fine to say, but then if you've got to actually get in there and do it, then it's an altogether different story. But people will be saying that now. That's what you need to do. You need to make it uncomfortable and do this and do that.
But that was the one way, though, Andy. Like, if we were all thinking if AJ is going to win this fight, none of us, around here were thinking that AJ is going to win it by, all of a sudden turning into Muhammad Ali and boxing and moving. It was going to be trying to rough him up. It was trying to be to get him in the clinch and use your elbows and the dirty arts of boxing. Use your weight. Remember what we was talking about here with Fury Wilder, when Fury, obviously a couple of stone difference, but was able to put that weight on Wilder.
Lean on him and more.
Yeah. AJ got in the clinch with Usyk a couple of times, and he was the first person to get one. I'm like, what are you doing? This is the time, surely, where you use your extra weight.
It was almost like he was caught in between all sorts of different stools there, because he, like you said, Andy, people say you need to be aggressive here, but actually in the presser after, Rob McCracken seemed obviously disappointed that they'd lost, but he seemed kind of disappointed in Joshua that he didn't follow instructions, or he didn't do what was quite a basic game plan, and that is get behind your jab, follow it up with something hard, to put pressure on this guy, because most of the time when he was jabbing, particularly in the early stages, he was just sort of pouring with it, and obviously Usyk just slipping either side of it. You think, this is not doing any good. You're not getting a hold on this guy. So McCracken was upset with, I from what I can sort of gather, upset with the way that he failed to put any pressure on. And you really just have to give credit to Usyk for that, because everyone else, let's face it, Joshua hasn't been flawless in his career. Obviously, he got knocked out by Ruiz, but even like the Povetkin fight, if you look back at the Povetkin fight, first few rounds of that, getting hit quite a lot, had to make adjustments. Obviously, ended up icing him. Great finish, but little cracks there that he's not the master boxer. He takes a bit of time to figure someone out, and when you can't figure him out, you see what happened last night, and that is a total lesson, really.
I think everybody was sort of kind of talking about Joshua imposing his physicality and roughing him up. When has anybody ever seen Anthony Joshua box like that? I've never seen Anthony Joshua lean on fighters. I've never seen Anthony Joshua maul fighters or be rough with them in the clinch. I've just never seen it. He's a mid-range fighter. When he's at distance, if he can hit you early and get your respect early on in the fight, put you in your box a little bit, then he can dictate the pace, he can dictate the terms. He just could never do that with Usyk. Every time he landed something with Usyk, I think you mentioned before we came on live that I think he stung him with a right hand in the 6th round where he just kind of stilled Usyk a little bit, but then Usyk came right back at him. And then you just think for Joshua, that's not really happened in his career. He's never really hit somebody with a good shot and had them just immediately come straight back at him, while obviously being down on the card. So this kind of notion that Joshua needed to go and impose his physicality.
No, but he wanted a bit, not necessarily phicality, more aggression. Like, I wanted to see a bit more aggression from AJ. Like, I was trying to count.
Yeah. There was not just singles.
I can't even remember seeing a 3 or 4 punch combination.
No, there wasn't one.
There wasn't one, was there? There wasn't one. That's what I expected to see more. I mean, you're standing there having a boxing match with a boxing master. I mean, it's not going to happen. Surely you get to the corner after round 6 and 7, you think, all right,
I need to change
I need
something.
to change
And
this because
that's what
we're
you're saying.
clearly not doing nothing.
Like he didn't make the adjustments in the fight. He kind of sticked with what was clearly not working throughout, which is why obviously you've said that you feel that Rob wasn't happy. And you can see why he wouldn't be.
No, yeah. As the trainer, you've got to look at that and think, okay, it's my job to tell him what to do here. And if he's not going out and doing it, what can you do? What else can he do? But also, what other instructions can you really give to Joshua at that point to try and change the fight? And all credit to Joshua, he kind of got back into it, got hold of it. And we were talking before we got started that after 8, I think I had it 5-3. Not out, beyond the realms of possibility that a judge had it 4-4 at that point. Maybe even it wasn't the case, but maybe
Swing the
one
other
have had 5-3 to Joshua. So he's not out of the fight at that point. So it's not like he's getting absolutely steamrolled at this point. He's there, and he got a couple of rounds under his belt, and it was like, okay, maybe there's a turning tide. But Usyk was so brilliant, he didn't let it happen.
But you know, those rounds that Joshua did get were razor thin.
Yeah, they were close
Whereas
rounds.
Usyk's rounds were very like, oh, that's an
100%.
Usyk round. So although AJ did have his spots, I was almost like, as an AJ fan, thinking, I'm going to give you that. Not that you won that round. It's almost like, all right, I'll give you that round. Yeah. I don't know what round it was. It might have been round 9 or 10 when Usyk was walking AJ down. And I was like, how is this happening?
And he certainly wasn't the last
How are you getting walked down like this? And the clapper went, and you almost saw relief from AJ's face, like, survived that round. So it almost became a survival thing after round 9. Like, I just don't want to be knocked out.
It was really interesting as well, wasn't it? We went in for some corner sound at the end of round 10, and there just wasn't any real urgency in the Joshua corner because...
Yeah, I couldn't hear any of that.
Well, they basically just said, keep looking to work off the jab. Almost just keep doing what you're doing, kind of. But every single judge would have given him Usyk the final 2 rounds. So when you look at the scores they've got through 10, one judge would have had it 5 apiece, the one who ended up with 115, 113. Steve Weisfeld in front of me would have had it 6-4 because he ended up with 116, 112. And then there was a 117, 112, which would have been 6-3-1 at that point. So if he goes out and wins those final 2 rounds, he's got a draw, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But there was just no kind of... There was nothing.
No.
And I just found that really surprising. You've got to light a bit of a fire underneath him there and just say, look, you've got to win these 2 rounds. If you win these 2 rounds, you've got a shot. But it should have been pretty apparent to the corner that he was losing at that point, I thought.
You watch Joshua, though, you do think... over the years, you watch him and you think there'll be a moment where he's going to get this guy. Like you sort of reckon with Takam, well, with everyone, Pulev. The Pulev fight, actually, if you re-watch it, it's much more competitive than
in those
you
middle
remember.
rounds after the 3rd round.
But you think he's going to get him. And Joshua's not a big, concussive, one-punch guy, never has been. But you think he's big and strong enough here that he's going to get him, he's going to pin him at some point. But there was never a moment in that fight when I thought that was going to happen. And as soon as you lose that element of, okay, he's got an eraser, then he's got nothing in the tank. And like what you say, what can you say at that point? How can you change that when Usyk's just getting stronger and coming into it? Because what he needed, Joshua, at that point was a bit more water in the basement, so to speak, so that Usyk wasn't coming on strong at the end. He's using his size and his strength to slow this guy down early on the fight. A bit like kind of what Lopez attempted to do, Teofimo Lopez against Lomachenko.
Yeah.
Try and hit him early so that he's not coming on strong at the end of the fight. In the end, Loma was decent in the back end of the fight. And it was the same here. Usyk actually got stronger. And those last few rounds, like the 12th round, unbelievable. And when you really think about it, they could have quite easily said to him, have a walk, you've won. Don't take any chances. And look what he did.
Yeah,
and
that
is a credit to him.
I'd love to know what they said to him, say after 8 rounds.
Yeah.
Like you say, like I had it 5-3 at that point as well, but you could have had it 4-4. And I'd love to be able to understand Ukrainian and just sidle up to the corner, which was really close to me, and just be able to have a listen, because I'd imagine what they would have said to him was, listen, you're in front here, but we need to win this big. Let's not leave any doubt here. And he just went out and he just took it away.
But he actually said that they told him not to look for the stoppage.
Wow, really?
That they had to hold him back a bit. And you can understand why they would have done that. And it was just... it was perfect, really. And if he had stopped him in that 12th round,
it would have been just the cherry
Can you
on top
imagine
of
it?
an already a masterful performance.
Yeah.
There would have been a good discussion about where he ranks in the top heavyweights about Usyk. I wonder if AJ's mentally over the Ruiz defeat. in Madison Square Garden.
I think it's fair to say that he's obviously changed as a fighter since
100%.
then. But you see that you've seen it with Vladimir Klitschko in the
And
past.
it's
You've seen it
no
with
bad
Lennox
thing, is
Lewis.
it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They became more well-rounded fighters.
But with Lewis, though, sorry to interrupt you there, I still saw aggression with Lewis. I still saw Lewis willing to go into the pocket and have a trade with someone, although he'd been knocked down by Rackman. He was still willing to kind of go and have it regardless still. And yes, he got better defensively and so did Klitschko, but you still saw them being aggressive and still going, maybe not so much Klitschko. With AJ now, there is a massive hesitation to go into the pocket and be aggressive. And we were there in Saudi and he threw a couple of big right hands at Ruiz and immediately stepped back. Against Pulev, there was a lot of that as well. The aggression's gone from it. There isn't that aggression anymore. And I don't know if that's a case of he doesn't trust his chin or he understands his own vulnerability and he's been told to kind of get in and then get out. But there needs to be a bit more dog. And
I think he needs a glimmer, though, to bring that out. He needs a window for it, rather than just trying to crash his way into it now. He's like, right, I need an opening here to take advantage of. And obviously it never came against Usyk. And to be honest, I don't think it would come against Fury either over the course of 12 rounds. I don't think he'd get that. So I feel like that mind frame, and he would have thought he was invincible at that point when he boxed Andy Ruiz in New York, 100%. And then when he left, he's no longer invincible. And I think that's going to change a man for like anyone, whoever it is. Not a bad thing. But it definitely, I think that does affect his performance. And I do think that unless he gets an opportunity, which he did against Pulev, he's not going to create himself one anymore.
I think, like, just to touch on what you were saying about the corners, obviously since the first Ruiz fight, we've seen the introduction of Angel Fernandez, Joby Clayton. He's now become more of a mainstay, more of a prominent figure in the Anthony Joshua team. Had Rob McCracken. Too many cooks potentially. Do you think that's a positive or a negative for Anthony Joshua? Do you think it had any bearing on what we've seen in his last?
And very quickly, just before Andy answers it, I mean, you have to chuck in the training he does in Finchley in the lead up to a big fight. He always goes to Finchley, so there's almost 4 cooks. If you take the Finchley, because that's almost that's like the beginning of the camp really for AJ. Then he goes to Sheffield, so that's 4 voices, 4 instructions. It's far too many.
And we're saying kind of like stuck in between styles. He's got various different coaches, various different training philosophies and methods and what have you.
It's always, for me, it is always a concern when potentially you do have too many voices, too many people giving advice. As a dynamic, they do seem to work well together. You see them around each other. They seem comfortable with each other. There doesn't seem to be any kind of power struggle going on there that I can see. But then again, they're a tight crew, aren't they? Everybody around Joshua, and it's a real inner sanctum that you don't really get any kind of access to. But I think really what it comes down to for me is the changes he made after the Ruiz fight. They won the rematch. So ultimately, you have to say that was successful. But either he trusts Rob completely or he doesn't. I think.
I don't know whether how involved Rob was in that decision-making process. I would think that he would be, and therefore the trust is then, that he's trusted him to bring people in. One thing did interest me, and I'm not sure I believe it still, is that during the build-up, Joshua said that he didn't do any pads in this camp. That he did bags and sparring and road work and footwork, and he was like, old school sort of stuff. And I sort of disregarded that because he's got pad men in the camp. If he didn't do any pads and he's relying on sparring people that aren't Oleksandr Usyk, then that's another reason why, okay, maybe why are you not doing any pads in a camp? Like, you saw videos of him on Instagram before the camp, like you say in Finchley, and then he's not doing any in his actual camp. And I wonder whether he's lying about that, but I don't know. I always think it's so easy, and it's a bit like with football, isn't it? As soon as a team starts losing a few games, like get rid of the manager. It's kind of that sort of situation. I'm not sure there's a problem in the camp necessarily. I just think there's a problem in Oleksandr Usyk.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
We're doing what we said at the start of the podcast, where we're talking about.
Road.
But obviously,
that's absolutely right, and yeah, it's easy to kind of. You're looking for answers, and the answer is really obvious.
You've got a little tash.
Yeah, exactly. Would it really have mattered who was in the corner last night?
Think so.
I don't think so. You could have had Buddy McGirt and Freddie Roach and anyone you can think of from decades gone past. You could have,
No, but would the performance have been better? I think the result would have still been the same, but would the performance been better? Like, I hate using the term when people say go out on your shield because I can't stand it. But there is an element of. I was watching Dillian White ringside, and look, Oleksandr Usyk will beat Dillian White for me. But I know Dillian White will try and go for the kill. He might get put to sleep.
Yeah.
But he will literally try absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Things you're not allowed to do in the dark arts of boxing, the elbows, the headbutts. He'll do anything to try and get a result. And that's kind of what I was screaming for AJ to just do something.
Yeah, but I think he'd had it beaten out of him at that point. He was tired mentally, physically.
Yeah.
And like you speak to Bellew about it, you speak to I remember speaking to Martin Murray about Golovkin. It's like everyone sees what's happening with the punches and stuff, but look what he's doing with his feet and think what that does to your head over the court. Like what am I, like you're constantly thinking. So I think he's knackered at that point and he's getting hit. And also he's had trauma because he's been hit repeatedly to the head and body. I know what you're saying.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I mean,
I know what you're saying, but I do think at that point it's sort of like out of his control what he does at that point. He's just like in survival mode. He's trying to do he's kind of fighting on instinct. It's hard to then expect him to produce anything at that point.
Without sounding stupid then, why take the fight? Well, realistically, we all know that this is what Usyk brings to the table.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no ego in saying, okay, you know what, take your WBO belt, Usyk.
He's still Anthony Joshua. He's still going to fight anyone. He's still not afraid of a man on the planet. He's not. Business-wise as well, I think it made sense. They needed that belt, or they wanted that belt to get the undisputed and all that business. It would have looked terrible if he dropped it.
Yeah, exactly. And we would have all been saying, well, he
he's
ducked
supposed to be-
Oleksandr
he's supposed to
Usyk.
be
He's supposed
Joshua.
to be a champion.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Just to go back on what you said there, Andy, obviously you said about Oleksandr Usyk being the problem, of course, yes. But I feel like, since Ruiz won, and even before that, you've mentioned kind of Carlos Takam, you've mentioned Alexander Povetkin, Vladimir Klitschko being another one.
Dylan White.
Yeah, Dylan White. We've seen vulnerabilities and fragilities, but I feel like since the first Ruiz fight, he has lost that aggression. There has been a marked change in what we've seen from Anthony Joshua since then.
To an extent, definitely in the rematch against Ruiz, but he put it on Pulev as well. But he got opportunities to do that. I know what you mean, but I do think it's going to depend entirely on who's in front of him. And if he was to box Dylan White next, well, he's not next, but when he boxes Dylan White again, he's going to be aggressive again, without a shadow of a doubt.
Because there's going to be opportunities there.
There'll be opportunities for him. He fancies it, and so I think it's dependent. I don't think there's a massive shift in his character necessarily. I do think somewhere in the back of his head he's going to be like more cautious. But I just think, and that was what I always thought about the Fury fight, which sadly we'll probably never see. And if we do, it's going to be a shadow of what it could have been. But I think that's the same situation there.
I've always just thought of AJ. Maybe it's his earlier fights when he's blowing people away that we can't remember. But I always just remember him as him just walking people down a bit.
Yeah, like with his tongue out and stuff.
Yeah. Like almost like this is easy
but
work.
You do that
and looking
to a level,
physically imposing.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like he starts and it's immediate, okay, we're on the back foot here and we're using the jab. And it might be just, I know he's a massive fan of Vladimir Klitschko and he obviously watches a lot of old school boxing and probably watches Lennox Lewis when he came back and everything starts with a jab. And I just feel like he starts cautious now as opposed to what he was pre-Ruiz, where it was a case of, I'm just going to walk you down and I'm going to get to you. Like you said, you expect him to get to you
at some
eventually.
point,
yeah. And you don't anymore.
The mental pressure is something that you mentioned there. We've seen Anthony Joshua blow out in the past, or we've seen him slow down. The Carlos Takam fight obviously is very heavy. The Pulev fight, he kind of let his hands go, and then he had those kind of middle rounds where he'd taken his foot off the gas a little bit. I think this is the first time we've seen Anthony Joshua kind of, I didn't look at the punch stats, but he wasn't busy last night. He wasn't letting his hands go. He didn't have that explosive, expending energy. But the mental pressure from the first bell to the last bell is what we saw in Anthony Joshua in those last two rounds. He looked absolutely exhausted by it.
Oh, he was completely and utterly spent, and everything that Deck said about the kind of state he was in the second half of the fight, explaining why, even if the will was there, which I'm sure it was, there's just nothing's happening, and the brain's sending messages to the body, and it just can't do it. And I think the mental pressure from Usyk is something that just can't be underestimated. I mean, none of us know what it's like to be doing what they're doing in there, particularly at that kind of level, and the nervous energy almost that just gets drained out of you by having someone in front of you who is always in front of you, but also never in front of you.
Well, they always say that missing punches is what tires you out. You missed a lot. You can't prepare to miss punches. Nobody does.
Physically and mentally, it's demoralising, and physically it's tiring. It's what really interests me about it now is how does he go about kind of explaining this one to himself? Because getting over the Ruiz fight, I think it was quite psychologically I thought it was tremendous that he won that rematch. He was under such an enormous amount of pressure. I really rated that win. But I don't know how do you explain this to yourself in a way that makes you really believe that you can beat him the next time around? Because with Ruiz, you could say, okay, well, maybe I did just take him a little bit lightly. There wasn't quite that fear there.
Yeah,
I got a little bit careless. He caught me with a pretty strange punch on the top of the head, which scrambled me. Okay.
I was away from home.
Oh yeah,
first
there's
fight
all
in
sorts
America.
of exactly. There's all sorts of things, aren't there? But with this, how do you do it?
I think we heard
How'd you do it?
the green shoots of it last night in the presser, and all credit to him. He came and did a presser last night. He must have been getting on for.
There's never any excuses, are there?
No, and he did it after Ruiz. I remember in New York, we were all sent home. Like, no, he's not coming.
Everybody had to come running back.
Run out, and then we're like, he's here. And you run back. And if you look at the footage of that, it's not a proper presser. He's just sort of stood behind a thing, and everyone sort of crowded round. Fair play. He came out again last night, and it was one of those, sort of a little bit where he's like, my eye went. And straight away you think, okay, that's what he thinks. He thinks he thinks his eye went. And he couldn't, to be fair, his eye went and he couldn't see out of it. And if you're boxing a southpaw, your right eye go and you're in trouble, obviously, especially a good one. So straight away you're thinking, okay, right, he's going to look at the cards, level after 8. Then my eye went, I couldn't see anymore. No wonder I lost. So he's got something to hold on to. He's got a foothold in it. Because otherwise you go, wow, that was not a one punch, a left hook on the top of the head that changed everything. That was a lesson. How do I recover? He's going to go, it was competitive, then my eye went.
Okay, well, I mean, that's...
And he's going to need that, isn't he?
It's, yeah, absolutely, because that's what they all need, isn't it? You look at, I think it'd be really interesting to see Wilder in Fight Week in a couple of weeks, because how do you explain that second fight against Fury? But he's reached for the wildest, the most wonderful things you could imagine.
Kind of build himself back up into that.
Just to try, because you have to do it. They have to explain it to themselves. They can't reach the conclusion that I got beaten by him because he's a lot better than me. You can't have that. That's impossible.
You can have it, but you can't have it if you're going into a rematch. I mean, you can have it, right, in the sense of, okay,
if you're then going to retire.
Done, we can swerve him. But if you're going to jump into a rematch, you can't have it. It's almost like Lara Warrington. When Warrington, the fans weren't there, I kind of underestimated him. You go again. With AJ, going into a rematch, it's going to be difficult. We spoke about his mental state and the nervous energy sort of in the fight. You look at the nervous energy he puts himself in when he's even walking to the ring.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah,
that was a weird one.
Like, you're fist pumping people, you're turning back and cuddles, and I'm like, just get into the ring, man.
Usyk was...
He had that
thing on.
thing
I want to get one of them. What was that? Yeah, I don't know.
It's like some kind of spaceman.
And the funny thing was, a couple of his cornermen had him on as well. But they sort of like obviously trundled to the ring separately. You're like, oh, it looks hilarious. These two blokes just walking. They're not ring walking. They still got his fingers on their
the
faces.
Jackets that the team had with the kind of like
light up.
The backwood, just absolutely.
But that ring walk, I thought, I've never seen him do this before. And it's like, if you're like that, like Manny Pacquiao does it all the time.
Yeah.
Cool, that's what you do on your ring walk. But when it's different, straight away alarm bells went a bit. And I'm like, this is a bit strange. But then I was also thinking, well, maybe he's so relaxed. And I think that was what he was trying to exude. I'm so relaxed here that I can do what I want in this ring walk. Whether he's trying to kid Usyk or kid himself.
It's himself, isn't it?
I feel like...
It's kind of like that during the week too, wasn't he? With the, this is just another day at work thing.
I'm at work.
I'm still in camp.
And in the presser, we had a sit down before the press, and he was so good and he was so open and honest. He's never been that honest. It was the most honest and the best quotes we've got since before the Ruiz fight, the first one. So it was kind of, he was really relaxed, and I don't know whether he actually is or whether he's putting it on. But in both fights he lost. And as soon as I saw that ring walk, I thought, this is a bit bizarre. And then he's talking to Clifton Mitchell, and then he's talking to Tony Bellew, and you think, what's happening here?
Plus, you've already got your 3 coaches in the corner.
Yeah.
And they're all giving him advice as well.
It was just a bit strange. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the Rocky entrance, though.
Yeah, it was quality ring walk.
But in my head, though, as it was happening, I was like, you can't lose.
Yeah.
You can't do that entrance with the fireworks and the pyrotechnics and everyone's going crazy. No easy way out as well. My favourite gym song, and then lose. You can't do it. And I thought, this is pressure. Just get to the ring.
Brilliant.
Mike Tyson, just get to the ring, towel, and just fight.
But I think he's trying to do that as well to get to. It's a one last little pop at Usyk before he gets his hands on, or his opponent before he gets his hands on him. And I'm sure that most of them will stand in that ring going, okay,
He looks relaxed.
Yeah, this is
He's
serious.
ready.
He looks relaxed. Look at all of this for him.
Yeah.
This guy's a superstar.
Yeah.
Usyk just totally bulletproof in that sense. A bit like Holyfield boxing Tyson. Tyson scared everyone. Holyfield never been scared of anyone in his life. So Usyk's like, I don't care about this.
I go
I've
to
done this
everyone's
everywhere.
backyard.
Yeah.
This is nothing.
Yeah, exactly. If anything,
I went to
this
Russia.
Is,
This is great.
even
This is
better.
actually
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
This is not
This is even
intimidating.
better.
This
The
is
what
more,
I
fun.
do.
the more boo my national anthem, more gets more people in.
Yeah.
It's just that's how he is, isn't he? That's how the absolute best are. They thrive on it, don't they? And that's that was absolutely what he did. And like you say, he just kind of marched to the ring. I don't think he was supposed to stop on the stage. I don't think he was, but he didn't anyway. Did he?
No.
He just came round the top bend into the home straight. Bosh, in he goes.
You could sort of imagine him as well. Like somebody said, right, you stop on there and you do this, and then you do, and it's just I'm just gonna get to the ring.
Fight.
Yeah. Let's talk about Usyk, because we have spoken a lot about obviously what Anthony Joshua didn't necessarily do. One of the big conversations that came out from last night was, is Usyk pound for pound #1 now?
I think you can make an argument.
Yeah.
When you look at the criteria, it's what have you done for me lately?
Yep,
Done that. Resume.
done that.
Nobody, and I include Canelo with resume when you look at actual, the real fights, and you look at skill and talent and actual ability. Is it better than Canelo? You probably, it's not in its shadow. They're comparable. The fact that he's even in the question after 19 fights or whatever.
Yeah.
So you look at resume, you look at talent, and you look at what have you done for me lately. You got to think he's right up there. And how my question when I was looking at the two, I wrote a piece about who's #1 at this point. You got to think, is his best win, whose best win is better? And if, like me, you didn't have him winning either Golovkin fight, then that changes everything. And if we're talking about hypothetical, totally mythical rankings that is based on what you think, not on what it says on BoxRec, you have to think, for me, he didn't beat Golovkin either time. For me, he lost the first and drew the second. So then you're like, okay, that changes this whole complex of the discussion. Longevity and body of work in total, you'd have to go with Canelo, who's had 60 fights or whatever, 3-division champion and whatnot. But when you really look at what Usyk's achieved and every fight, and that run was phenomenal, one of probably the best run ever at 200 pounds, you kind of start thinking, he is.
But you can also kind of flip the body of work thing, can't you? And say, okay, Canelo's body of work is more extensive, as in more fights, but the fact that Usyk's done what he's done in so
small,
few fights.
And in his opponent's backyards as
time,
well.
every time.
And also, one of the other metrics that you measure pound for pound are, he gave £20 away to Anthony Joshua. All right, Derek Chisora, with all due respect, is not an elite level fighter, but he gave £40 away to Derek Chisora.
100%.
That is pound for pound level stuff. Canelo obviously has gone through the weights, but when they get on the scales, all right, admittedly they're not always the same size when they get in the ring. They're still the same weight on the scales. Oleksandr Usyk, visibly smaller than Anthony Joshua. Everybody's talking about the size. And he dominated the fight as well. There's no kind of, the Bradis fight was close. I had Usyk winning that fight, but it was a close fight. Bradis, we've seen, is an exceptional cruiserweight. But Oleksandr Usyk has gone into his opponent's backyards. Never have you ever seen Oleksandr Usyk or talks of Oleksandr Usyk avoiding a fight or going a different route. He's always gone, there's the great Bernard Hopkins quote of, I always ran to the fire. That's Oleksandr Usyk.
Yeah.
Some fighters have to go to the fire though because they're not the draw.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Usyk was a draw in Ukraine, like the Klitschko's were in Germany, then you kind of wonder whether or not he would travel as much as he does.
Wouldn't it be great to see that rematch in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Honestly,
It ain't happening. Eddie
No.
already said.
Eddie
last
said
night.
we ain't going there. This
There's not enough
this
money.
really ain't a Rocky movie,
Yeah.
regardless of the Rocky intro song. It's difficult for me to look past Canelo. It's not necessarily the body of work. It's more a case of the consistency
Yeah,
when he
that's
fights
true.
as well.
It's very true.
You're fighting every 6 months, every 4 months. It's ridiculous. And then you're fighting unbeaten guys and breaking them. He broke Billy Joe Saunders' face. Billy Joe Saunders an unbeaten fight. Say what you want about Billy Joe Saunders' resume. He was an unbeaten fighter going into that fight. Callum Smith was the recognised ring
magazine
#1
champion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At super
If you
middleweight.
cut away everything apart from their top 10 wins, for instance, you're probably going to have to go with Usyk. If you go on those top 10, I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying that is one way of doing it. And when you look at it like that, the condensed nature of Usyk's record, Usyk's #1 for me. But I would probably go with you and say, but he's done it that long for 60 fights in different weight classes. He's proven it for long.
But you also see...
I didn't even think, like the Lara fight, going back, like, close. It could have gone either way. But even fighting Lara, that's a solid performance. And when Lara was an unbelievable fighter back then, even if you had it, Lara winning by a round or a draw, that's still a fantastic performance from Canelo. And that was a Canelo that's nowhere near the Canelo we're seeing now. Like if that Canelo was to fight Lara now, it's a completely different fight because that Canelo is just that good. I just think Canelo, I love fighters that fight every 4 or 5 months because we don't see it anymore. And as good as Usyk is, that's his 3rd fight in 3 years. I need to see a bit more than that for me to say that. But yeah, in terms of performances, I guess you've got to go for Usyk. But I don't know what makes up a pound for pound, but I have to chuck in, when are you fighting as well? Who are you fighting? And I think, for me, I'd have Canelo just.
He was busy in the World Boxing Super Series. Obviously, the way that the contracts are, you have to be busy, you have to be ready to go when the series calls you. For me, if you look at him, I was trying to think of this last night. He's now had 2 of the great performances of the last 10 years against Murat Gassiev in Moscow and Anthony Joshua in London. I think you could maybe put Guillermo Rigondeaux against Nonito Donaire in the mix.
Ruiz Joshua.
Yeah. Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder rematch in the mix.
Klitschko.
Yeah.
Fury Klitschko may be for me the outstanding win of any active fighter.
Yeah.
The number 1 win. But Usyk's in that discussion. But are any of Canelo's wins in there?
I don't necessarily think so. And also one thing, I mean, I know because Canelo, it's kind of the flip side to him having that longevity. You do go back for many, many years. Floyd Mayweather beat Canelo easy. No, I mean, he made it look easy. It probably wasn't easy. We've never seen Oleksandr Usyk come. I mean, the Bradis fight was close. Again, I think Usyk won that fight, but we've never seen him. You know, how much weight do you give that to a pound for pound discussion? The fact that we have seen him fight a naturally smaller man in Floyd Mayweather and lose, 10 out of 12 rounds unless you're Adelaide Bird. Or was it Adelaide Bird? Yeah, CJ Ross. There's so many. There's always those warning signs with people, isn't there? You see like the judge's name on the thing and you go,
Yeah, I mean, that you have to take that into account. There's caveats with that fight and that defeat, and the way he's responded to that as well. You have to put that in your thinking when it comes to whether he's number 1. And to be honest, Canelo's only sort of got to number 1 quite recently because I had Lomachenko right up there for the same reason. But the condensed nature of the work he's done, and it's not his fault that he hasn't had 60 fights as a professional. He didn't start when he was 15. No. So it's kind of Canelo's there now, and for me, I think he's still. I don't know.
I don't think it's a wrong answer.
But if he beats Caleb Plant, does that add to it, or does he stay about where he is?
If you clean up the 168 division in 16 months,
I mean, this is what makes it just an interesting conversation, isn't it? Yeah. Because there's a lot of opinion in it. It's very hard to. I mean, being a total killjoy, which I like to be if at all possible. I just don't believe in pound for pound rankings. I don't see the point in it. But I will happily discuss it because it's fun. But ultimately, if you're going to, you can debate. For me, you can debate who's the technically better boxer, but who's the better fighter. If Tyson Fury boxes Canelo, Tyson Fury's going to win, and it's not a fair fight. But ultimately, who's the better fighter? Well, who would win if they fought?
It's also hard as well because they're so different, Usyk and Canelo, that they're not really comparable, are they? In the way they go about the business. It's sort of what you like in that point. And I mean, we're blessed that we're sort of got both of them happening at the same time, and that's not even to mention Inoue and Lomachenko and everyone else, Crawford and
Josh Taylor.
Yeah, Josh Taylor. It's a pretty heady mix at the moment. But yeah, when you look at best wins, I would say Usyk. He's got a better five fight sort of CV than Canelo.
I don't think Usyk's fought anyone as good as Canelo fighting Golovkin in his peak first time round. There's no one as good as that on Usyk's resume.
Moving up to heavyweight and beating Anthony Joshua in London?
I think Golovkin, I thought Golovkin was just incredible.
He didn't fight him 2 years before then.
I think I agree with you on that.
I thought Golovkin
but also, did you think he won that fight? So that's where it falls down.
I didn't.
No, exactly. I thought Golovkin won the first. I actually did think Canelo nicked the second fight, but it was very, very close. But the first fight,
I remember honestly going into that fight thinking Golovkin is just a special.
But also, it's worth pointing out that Canelo vacated the WBC title and didn't fight him until 2 years after it was mandated.
And that was probably not his decision. You know,
No, sure, not necessarily his decision. And we've seen Canelo. I'm not saying Canelo was a ducker or anything like that.
Test as well.
Yeah,
let's not forget
that adds to it, doesn't it? Minus there.
Yeah. Just we're going to try and get on with things, so we do want to touch on the rest of the card slightly as well. But before we do
was there other fights on the
Don't worry, we'll come to that anyway. But you mentioned Oleksandr Usyk at heavyweight. You just mentioned Tyson Fury versus Canelo. Obviously, we're not going to see that. But Usyk versus Tyson Fury, or even I'm going to throw Deontay Wilder in the mix as well. How do we think Usyk gets on against those other two of the top three, the widely regarded big three at heavyweight?
I think Fury would beat him. Because he'd be fighting a bigger version of himself in a lot of ways. Fury's got the movement that we all know about, so I think Fury he's got an equal skill set and he'd be too big. That's where the size would matter. He would be able to make it matter. Wilder, I mean, that would be a really
that's a fantastic
that'd be a really interesting
because that's the type of fight. Sorry to interrupt, Andy. You kind of mentioned about Anthony Joshua. You never really expected it to come. Wilder, it can
from
come.
Anywhere.
Yeah,
Anywhere.
No, Ortizi. It's Ortizi.
He's going to make it Ortizi, isn't it? Ortizi does it. It's like, whatever, I don't care what happens here. And it's that old adage, he only has to be perfect for a second. And it's true.
It's so true.
And it's true. And for me, the Fury fight is, you can't pick against Fury there, because the problem is Usyk's a conundrum that is hard to solve. But Fury's a conundrum that's hard to solve. So how do you go about solving him? So it's like Usyk knows how to figure out big 6'4", 5 heavyweights. No orthodox.
Conventional.
He knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for years. You can get sparring to do it. How do you go about solving Fury? So I don't think he wins that fight. I think he beats Wilder, but there's just always the caveat. There's always the caveat, and that's what would make that such an intriguing fight. And I don't think Wilder would do anything differently either than he would do against anyone else. It's just, I'm going to try and set something up.
Yeah.
Also, he's quite unorthodox in the way that he sets things up. So it's not like Joshua, where it might come off a jab, a double jab, whatever it might be. Wilder, it could come from somewhere that you're not expecting it, and then that's a problem for Usyk, because he finds it hard to read. He's a reader, isn't he? It's like, how's he going to read that? So the thing is, he's got a good beard as well as the tash. Like he took that one and it steadied him, and he was bang straight back to work. It's a great fight. It's such a weird thing that we're talking about. Joshua's at the window now, isn't he? And if he loses the rematch, he's got no power in the division. That whole team, which has had power ever since 2012, I've got no power anymore. Can you imagine him in a post-fight interview basically calling people out and wanting a crack at belts and stuff like that? That could be him if he loses the rematch. It's crazy to think, but that's where we are now.
Also, just touching on Tyson Fury and kind of him having the size, which I agree with all of the points about the size and being able to control the distance against Usyk being awkward. But we've also seen on the flip side that Tyson Fury can use his weight. He can lean on fighters. He can. If it's not going the way that he needs it to go, let's say Usyk is kind of outmaneuvering him from distance, which I don't necessarily see, but let's say it does. He can lean on fighters. He can maul fighters. The dark art, so to speak. We've seen it obviously against Deontay Wilder. We've seen it against Steve Cunningham in the past, who gave him a lot of problems as a smaller, nippier guy. So we can see Fury kind of do it one of two ways, really, at least one of two ways. Whereas we never really had that in Joshua. We didn't see that last night.
3 stone. I mean, there's a difference.
And a foot taller.
And it's ridiculous. And it's just, and not only that, but the mind games and the lead up to it as well.
I don't think Usyk really cares about.
I think he's bulletproof to that.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about any.
I think it would be enormously entertaining.
See, I'd love to see
it both just. Yeah, but it'd be tremendous. I don't think either one could have any effect on the other.
I think Fury would retreat. I think he'd play the straight guy in that. I really do. I don't think he would be I think he sees Usyk as a maverick and a bit of a madman, and it's the other type of people that he likes to get into, as far as I can tell. And I feel like he would know there's no point doing this with Usyk, and he wouldn't bother. It wouldn't happen. And I think that would also be a factor in the fight as well, because he would just think, right, I just need to beat this guy in a boxing match. He says it all the time.
It's such a fantastic fight. Obviously, Fury hasn't fought over here for a while.
Yeah.
Will he fight over here again? We don't know. But it'd be almost that revenge mission for a British boxer.
Yeah.
If Fury was to fight Usyk over here.
He'd love that.
Honestly, they would love it, wouldn't they? At Tottenham again. but Fury versus Usyk. As
Yeah,
a,
we
but
seen
yeah,
Fury after the first
the crowd
Deontay
would be
Wilder fight. He was
incredible.
doing it for Britain,
Doing it for
and
Britain.
Joshua didn't step up. You could go. Fury would kind of love that, wouldn't he?
would
I'm
absolutely
going to
love
come in.
that.
Joshua couldn't do it, so I'm
And
going to
I've
do
never
it.
Has he said anything yet, Fury?
I don't.
I was expecting.
I don't believe so.
There's nothing. So
And I've
don't
never
believe
thought
so.
Fury could do a stadium over here. By the way, by like being with AJ, yes, but Fury versus Usyk, if he was to, no. Now I think Fury coming back and fighting Usyk
Yeah,
would do that
it
stadium.
would do Wembley.
It would do
no,
it, wouldn't
not
it?
a
Yeah,
problem.
it would do it, and it would be amazing.
Old Trafford.
Yeah, if he
Yeah.
beats Wilder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sold.
Yeah.
I'm sold. That's the beauty of the heavyweight division. We always think it has to be Fury AJ or Fury Wilder, whatever. No, Usyk's jumped in now, and all of a sudden,
it's incredible, isn't it? How the snakes and ladders of it. Where earlier in the week, Anthony signing a career-long deal with Matchroom, and all the talk is, well, if he beats Usyk, then everybody's talking about a bidding war between Sky to keep him on box office, and the DAZN going to wheel out barrow loads full of cash again, and all the rest of it. And now, one defeat, and your stock just falls. It plummets.
now they're looking for receipts.
Yeah,
It's,
you got to think
it
though.
is brutal.
It is
It's
also
absolutely brutal.
It's also quite bleak the state of the sport that we never saw Joshua Wilder, and now we never saw Joshua Fury. The two fights.
Joshua Wilder's the one for me, because Joshua Fury, like Eddie did basically get
It was
that
done. Yeah, it
and
was
then
the
the
contract.
arbitration went the way
Yeah.
that they weren't expecting it
But that's the state
to
of
go.
boxing.
But
yeah.
with Wilder, it's like they had plenty of time to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was marinating,
Yeah.
that lovely
Yeah.
word that we like to hear in boxing, for a long time.
Yeah.
That was 2 years in the making. 2 years of, splits talk and flat fees, and they don't want it, and proof of funds and all of that shit. That kind of came with it. That was 2 years of wasted time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Wasted
that also a
time.
problem for boxing, whereby we all think it's done now because there's a few losses on sort of either side?
No,
Big fights have happened in the past still, where people have approached with losses.
A million
And they still-
percent. But
do you know what I
I
mean?
do think it's changed though, because Wilder Joshua would have been two undefeated heavyweight world
Yeah,
champions.
punchers as well. Big punchers.
That would have been insane. And then as
Insane,
soon as
insane.
Joshua loses, that is changed. It's transformed. Now, Fury, of course, Joshua's still going to sell out Wembley, not a problem. But it's changed. The whole complexion of it is transformed entirely.
There's no limit to the amount you can hype an undefeated
Yeah.
fighter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you've got two,
Yeah.
and they've got all the belts,
Yeah.
you can say anything you want. about
Yeah, it was
people
perfect.
will
It
It
was
was,
the
yeah,
perfect
it
storm, and it didn't happen. And
Yeah.
you just think, how was that allowed to happen?
For us to see Fury versus Joshua now, we almost need Wilder to beat Fury.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it would be for no belts. You've gone for, I'm not sure, like 95% of the paying public are not going to care that the IBF, the WBA, the WBO, whatever is on the line anyway. So they don't really care about it. But it does lose something, doesn't it? And that's and it's worth pointing out that neither fight is now as lucrative as it would have been anyway. So you throw that in with kind of promotional and network politics as well. You've now got not as much money in the pot to entice people to cross the divide.
Saudis won't knock on the door.
I was
for
just
it.
going to say exactly
They're not
that.
gonna knock
Probably
on
a
the door for
better
that.
chance now, though, that it would be here.
Yeah, for sure. Are we sure? Are we sold that we see Usyk Joshua 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sitting in that presser
Another way to go.
yesterday, I don't think there is any shadow of a doubt that it doesn't happen, because Joshua wants it desperately. Hearn wants it. It's contracted. Their feeling on it is that where do they go? Where else could they go? And the fact is, they could go and beat a few. They could have 3 or 4 fights and rebuild. And this is kind of the problem with boxing now, particularly when you're boxing twice a year and you're a star like Joshua. He can't go and have a few. He can't have a rebuild.
Can't go and fight Marius Vac, can he?
Can't do it. Like he can't do it. You can't go and box. You can't go and. I saw someone tweet that when Muhammad Ali lost to Joe Frazier, he went and had something like 14 or 15 fights before he beat him in the rematch. Joshua can't do that. He has to jump in. He has to jump into this fight now and do it again and hope for the best, much like he did against Ruiz. Because if he wasn't going to do it against Ruiz, he ain't going to do it now. And I feel like it happens instantly.
Yeah.
Eddie even said February. I believe it'll. I mean, Saudi, I'm sure will stump up enough money. My feeling is that it will be in Saudi.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Sort of first third of next year, maybe.
Yeah.
You can't really do it in England unless you go to Cardiff, which I don't think they would. I mean, it's far too big for the O2. So I think it's a Saudi job. And I just don't know how he wins.
And do you think you if you do it in the UK anyway, I agree with you. I think it goes to Saudi. But if you do it in the UK anyway, is there any problem? Is there a problem now getting 60, 70,000 in there? We've seen Joshua get knocked out. We've seen him lose comprehensively to Oleksandr Usyk.
I think there probably is, because with sports fans, as we know, boxing's got a niche following week in, week out, and then these big fights could pull in a huge floating audience. But just from people I know myself, like friends of mine who are sports fans and like watching a big fight, I'm pretty confident that what they'll say to me now is, he's been beat twice now.
Yeah.
That's what they'll say,
Yeah.
and they won't be that interested in the rematch. So I'm not sure they could. I think it'd be a lot more difficult to sell the rematch. It's just that. It's that simple, really.
I think Cardiff's a problem as well, because a lot of people went to Cardiff for the Parker and then the Takam fight. It's basically a nightmare. There's not enough hotels, not enough taxis.
No, it's horrible.
There's probably not enough fuel now, to be honest. But there's a lot of people went, okay, I'm not doing Cardiff again. So like that, what did they get in total there? 130,000 people or whatever over the course of those two fights. I think it's too big for the O2 though. I do think like it generates more money at the gate than the O2 would offer. So for me, it's Saudi. Eddie said last night he said he's already had messages from people going, we want the rematch. So you have to think that's probably Saudi.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're not stumping up 200 million quid for it, but it's probably going to represent the most lucrative of the options. Joshua's done Saudi before. It's not a problem. They take the money. They know that the money's there these days. So that is my instinct.
If he loses the rematch,
Oh, stop it, Rob.
what next for Anthony Joshua? If he boxes him in February, goes out to Saudi, loses another decision.
If he loses
then
the
what?
rematch, like
What would it be, 31, 32?
yeah,
He's 31 now, isn't he, Joshua?
As Dex said, and he's absolutely right. There's you can't not take the rematch now. That's where he is, and that's really where he's been almost since he beat Charles Martin.
Yeah.
He's been in that, you got through that bottleneck, and you can't come back down through it. It's you're there then. So he's going to have to take that rematch. But you know, I was talking to Matt Macklin about this on the way out last night, and he was saying to me, look, if I was really close to Joshua, if I was his brother, say, I'd wait till the dust settled. I would sit him down and I would say to him, listen, look at what you've done. It's absolutely sensational. But we don't need this rematch.
That's what
Not
I was
against
going to
him.
say. Does he
Not
need
against
somebody to pull him and say, look,
But it doesn't matter who says it, Rob. He's still going to do it
Yeah,
because
he's gonna
that's
do it.
what they do as fighters, isn't it? That is what
No,
they
I
do.
agree, yeah.
But
I
if he loses a rematch against Usyk, then he should retire.
Wait,
I
does
think-
I
it
don't think he
depends
will, though.
how he loses.
Yeah.
I mean, if he gets stopped, then yeah, I'm with you.
I
But
mean,
if it's
I
a
don't-
competitive
Yeah,
fight,
no,
I
fair.
don't-
It does. It
I don't
does. It
think-
depends.
I don't
It does.
think
The manner of the defeat would be important. And I'm not completely ruling him out in the rematch, but on the evidence of last night, you know, this is heavyweight boxing, anything can happen, and blah blah. But on the evidence of last night, I just don't see it. But I think you're right. I think if he loses the rematch, I still don't think he will, because almost every fighter finishes on a defeat, but it's usually 2, maybe 3 in a row before you really get the message that that's it, and that's how they have to be, isn't it? That's their kind of tragic flaw. They always end up going on maybe a little bit too long because they need to absolutely know, is it really over? And it's like I feel
well, if he loses the
cruel
rematch, that'll
kind
be
of talking about him in these terms when you look at what he's done and what he's given, but were he to lose that rematch in similar fashion to how it went last night, then it's not like there wouldn't be fights out there for
No,
him.
there's
It's not
always
like he's
someone there.
all of a sudden becomes a bad fighter, but what would the point of
what's the want.
But that's what
going
I
on.
mean about him having no power anymore. And you go from, it's a bit like with Saunders when he lost to Canelo. Eddie made a point that you get this big money and you have a fight against Canelo in that sort of magnitude. Once you lose, you're right down a few steps again. And then how do you get yourself up for that? And why would you even bother? And Joshua
it.
would get in that position. I feel that his fights, because it's Anthony Joshua, even if he loses the rematch, it's still going to be a colossal show and it's still going to be a big build-up and everything else. He's not going to slot on an undercard. He's not going to have a 10-rounder. But I feel like he's going to go on. I think he'd go on till he's 35, 36, even no matter what happens. And this is why, he'll probably end up boxing Fury one day.
Yeah.
It'll be a different fight, but it will happen one day, I'm sure of it.
I think there's probably, outside of Usyk, obviously, I agree. I think we do see the rematch.
He
But
still needs the white rematch.
exactly.
He's
I think
desperate
there's
for it.
three names there that I think we still see him box. I think we still see the Fury fight at some point. I really do think that at some point we still see that. I think we see the Dillian White rematch at some point, and I think we see the Andy Ruiz rubber match.
Nah,
You don't think so?
surely not. You reckon?
I think we see the Andy Ruiz rubber match at some point.
Well, do you know what? It would be a good. It's one that, say he loses to Usyk, they need to sell something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's
Yeah,
going to
you
be
could sell
reasonably
that.
cheap.
Yeah.
You could
Yeah,
sell
you
it.
could
And it's
But,
1-1. You could do it on Cinco de
There's
Mayo or
also
something like
Joe
that.
Joyce. There's also Daniel Dubois. You know, like there's these guys that you could market. It doesn't matter how many times
Yeah.
Joshua lost, really. It doesn't, and that's why I feel like he would go on. It's not like there'd be nothing for.
Problem
And
is
also-
though, if you're right, it could go on, but then it all changes, doesn't it? I mean, it's not stadium fights anymore. It's arenas. You can't. The names you just mentioned there potentially. Daniel Dubois, I know we're talking years to go. Joe Joyce, those aren't stadium fights for AJ anymore because look, if we just for the hardcores, we don't fill stadiums. We barely fill arenas. Hardcore fans, you need the casuals on board.
with that-
the
with that
casuals
said-
aren't jumping on board Joe Joyce. They're not.
But we were saying people said that about Usyk, and I know COVID helped to get people in. They're just desperate to be in a stadium. I feel like might not sell a stadium fully, but you'd probably get 40,000 still, and then
Might go
that
to a
justifies-
different stadium.
Then that
different
justifies
size
it.
stadium. You
Exactly. Go to there's plenty. I feel like he is like still
Vicarage
will,
Road?
will always be the attraction that take. And but even well, yeah. I mean, he did always talk about that. Maybe he'll finally fight Chisora at Vicarage Road.
There we go. Like there's I do think there is potential for him, and also like we mentioned about like the manner in which if he does lose the Usyk rematch, you know, it's not often that you see a fighter who has got more to give, who's like 32, 33, leave on a decision loss. It's often when they get chinned. It's often when they get knocked out, and then he
There
doesn't
needs to be
have
a full stop, doesn't
yeah,
it, generally?
yeah, and he doesn't have a oh my eye went or I wasn't right or something to cling on to. No, you got ironed out in 3 rounds or 4 rounds or something like that. It's a conclusive ending.
Yeah, and that sort of, like I said before, kind of tragically, almost that is what happens. That's
Yeah.
what it takes, isn't
Yeah.
it? I'd love to see him fight in Nigeria.
Yeah,
He says he
they could
wants
do the
to-
Joe Joyce fight there.
I'd love to see that.
Could do the Joe Joyce fight there.
I know
Both
there's a real will there to make it happen, and you know they're really looking at it at the moment, and they're looking to do
I'd love to see the
things to
Usyk
really
rematch there.
prove it.
No, it sounds crazy, but in, almost in the way in which Ali, I know it's a silly story, but Ali was a big underdog in Foreman in Africa, and it kind of came behind him and it galvanized him. I think that's where it really should be, if he can. But it's just the money, isn't it? Obviously, in Africa, where the Saudi money is just going to be so
There.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those sort of not exhibition-y fights, but those sorts of novelty places. It doesn't matter how many times he's lost. It doesn't matter what the
Yeah,
run is,
yeah,
what belts
yeah.
are on the line. They ain't going to care. at all.
No.
So that's why I just see him going. I don't see it being a point where this is make or break. I really don't. But I do think that, like Rob McCracken, for instance, might look at the rematch and be like, we don't need this. But I don't feel like he would be able to prevent it from happening.
I don't think anybody
Is that
can
a
stop
problem
it
then?
happening.
Is that a problem?
I think it is slightly, but the same thing happened. I remember McCracken did not like the George Groves fight for Froch in the first place, and people thought it was, you know, Eddie Hearn had spoken like a year before saying it was medically unsafe for George Groves and stuff like that. McCracken knew it was going to be a tough night. He knows this stuff. I'm sure he knew that Usyk fight was not great for his boy, like at all. And now he'll know even more. And he's the one now tasked with trying to turn it around. But I don't think he can prevent it from happening. I don't think anyone could dissuade Anthony Joshua from that happening.
No, I totally agree, and I think the one person who would probably try harder than anybody else would be Rob,
Yeah.
because I don't claim to know him particularly well, but the vibe I get off him is that he's a good bloke and he really cares about him.
Yeah.
And it's probably never really been about the money for him. Rob, you know, training AJ, although I'm sure he's done tidily out of it. But I just don't see how anyone would be able to persuade him otherwise. He's going to take that fight. There's no possible other outcome, is there?
Should we touch upon the undercards at all? A little bit.
I would say it wasn't a good one, was it?
It wasn't a good one. I tweeted it. You know, it was everything I expected it to be, and I was still kind of okay with paying for it. I had to pay for it because I wasn't there. So I paid my £25, and I paid it for the main
Also,
event.
25 quid. I know you work for Sky, Andy, so we're well on it, but it's crept up to 25 quid, and now it's just standard. Like my mates were texting me last night, like normal mates, going 25 quid. Thought it used to be 15 quid.
Yeah.
I was like, speaking to Andy Clarke. End of a tweet.
Prices don't go down, do they?
No, they
I was talking to my wife about this last night, and she didn't buy it because she thought 25 quid. Are you sure? But it wasn't that long ago. It was $16.95, was
Yeah.
it?
I know.
And then it was $19.95.
It's a big
And then we were
And
told
then
it was
for
a
the
one-off
Ruiz
for the Ruiz
Yeah.
rematch, and then we saw it for Pulev for the
And
mandatory.
you're right, it ain't going down.
It's not
No.
going down. It's not
The
going down.
Usyk rematch should be 30 quid.
Yeah. if it's on Sky.
Down.
Well, yeah, if it's on Sky, good point.
Yeah,
Good
exactly,
point.
yeah.
Right, so undercard, we saw Lawrence Okoli blow out Dylan Prazovic. Not really a shock for anybody,
No,
I
but
don't think.
I was quite impressed with the way he did it, the way he's using his lead hand, the way he set him. I thought that Prazovic looked decent as well. Like I thought he moved quite well.
He wasn't apprehensive
no,
at all, was he?
not
He was
whatsoever.
Right on the borderline of range, low lead hand.
Yeah,
He was
you know
up for
what
it.
he's doing, Okoli. You know, obviously he's not. He's looking for a big cross, like, and that's what he's going to do. I thought I was reasonably impressed with that performance. I think the improvements he's making under Shane McGuigan are very, very obvious, quite subtle, but obvious when you really look at what he's doing, and that's what he needed. I thought it was fine. It was what we expected, but impressive in that manner. I thought.
Ade, thoughts on Lawrence?
Yeah, look, I like Lawrence. I've said to you so many times that I don't think he's got out of. I don't think we've seen anywhere near the best yet, just because
We're just
there's
scratching
so
the
much,
surface.
just scratching
Yeah.
the surface, and he's gone through British, European, Commonwealth level, now world champion, and he's still scratching the surface. And it's scary to think how good he's going to be in a couple of years I think if he stays at Cruise. I know there's a lot of talk about him going to heavyweight, and I understand that, but with Bradis now staying at Cruiser, and Makabu's out there as well, you honestly could see an undisputed sort of undisputed Okoli in a couple of years, 18 months. I think he's that good.
I think he's got another 12 to 18 months left at the weight. It's interesting. I spoke to Shane McGuigan when he first went and joined Shane, and one of the very first things that Shane said to me was, when he moves up to heavyweight, he's going to be a fucking handful.
Yeah.
One of the first things he said to me, this is before he'd won a European title.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think Shane said in the interview last night with Sky that he believes he's at 50% of what his potential is. So I agree with you, Ade. I think there's a huge scope for improvement. Bradis next?
Yeah, you'd hope so. It'd be Brady's fights in 2 weeks, doesn't he, against Artur Man, I think. So they're keeping them on a similar kind of timeline. The 16th, yeah, so three weeks, and that's a really good fight.
Yeah.
It's the obvious fight, and I think he said during the week that 12 to 18 months longer he could stay at cruiserweight. I saw him on Wednesday, so that was the day he had to do his check weigh 3 days before the fight, when you need to be within 3%. So he would need to have been 206 pounds on Wednesday, and it's not the easiest thing in the world for him to make that weight.
He's vast. He's a colossal.
What you often get is fighters actually having to cut weight to make the check weight,
Yeah.
and then settle in there for a little bit.
Yeah.
George Groves said
talking about that. He doesn't do that, but he was talking about that, but he's obviously. But people will say, won't they? It should be hard to make the weight. That means you're fighting at the right weight. But Shane, I remember talking to him about exactly the same thing. And one thing he thought was that when he moved up to heavyweight, he would be less inclined to kind of wrestle, because it just wouldn't work.
And he'll have bigger targets in front of him. He sparred a lot with Daniel Dubois over the years, and that's great sparring for Dubois for a start. But it's not like he's new to it. He sparred Joshua. He's done. Yeah. I think he's gonna be great. I think he'll be really good at heavyweight. Interested to see how he handles it. I thought last night there was a moment when he was getting announced and stuff. He had that moment because obviously he won the world title in a bubble. It was strange,
of course.
remember?
Yeah.
And it was like he obviously it was a very one-sided beatdown where he won the title in front of no one.
Yeah.
To have that moment. Yeah, you were there. I was there.
He was loving it last night.
Chris Billum-Smith was there. It was those bubbles were eerie.
Yeah,
at the
really
best of
were.
times. But to win a world title in there was,
I was happy to hear him get.
Yeah,
the applause
reception
he got.
was amazing.
I didn't think he kind of thought, what kind of reception am I getting?
mainly for the
Yeah,
ring.
and it was good.
Brilliant to see.
It's a
Okoli's just like he's
N-N-Y. I love
Okoli's just like
Get it on Spotify.
I chatted to him quite a lot in the amateurs. Like I remember sitting with him after the WSB finals, and he'd just been stopped by Erislandy Savon, who's probably still the best fighter he's ever been in with. I would say definitely still the best fighter he's ever been in with. And what I've always really liked about him is, even then he was saying, I know this sounds mad, but I still think I can beat him. And then he drew him in the Olympics early on, and he lost again. Yeah. But he learns, he soaks everything up, he doesn't take criticism personally, and he's had plenty, despite everything that he's achieved. And when you get someone who turns pro off the back of a handful of amateur fights, there can be so much more to come, like you said. There can be so much more to come. Whereas sometimes you get someone who turns pro off the back of 300 amateur fights, and they're already very good, but that might be it.
They've had enough then.
Yeah, that might be it. They might not really get any better, but with Okoli, you just think, Shane's probably right. He probably is at about 50%, but that power is he kind of almost half scuffed Prasovic.
Yeah, it was a strange old
sort
around
of
the
like
top
to the
of
side of the
yeah,
head.
just like you could see his legs just went a little bit immediately, and it was a real shock to him because he almost kind of like gestured to the referee as if it almost just give us a second. They do. What the fuck was that? Fighters do weird things when they get hit hard, when they really feel it for the first time. Because looking at his pro career, there wasn't much of him to watch, but I think that was basically the first time we'd ever felt anything like that. And it was almost just kind of like, oh, this is a bit weird. Just give us a second.
It's interesting what you said there. Just before we move on about the bubbles, we had Costello in a couple of weeks ago, and he made a great point that during the pandemic and obviously in the pandemic, but during those bubbles, you kind of kid yourself that, oh, this is okay, and boxing's back, and blah blah blah. And
bizarre.
you kind of not get used to it, but like you don't realise how bizarre until you get crowds back.
Yeah.
Oh mate.
When you got 20,000 Leeds fans screaming for Josh Warrington.
Even the Joshua Pulo fight where they let some fans in.
Yeah.
1,000.
But it was at Wembley, where obviously the same place of all the bubbles have been the matchroom ones, and it was like, it felt like a totally different thing, and it was only 1,000 people there.
Oh, yeah.
Even then, and the bubbles were odd, and it's no surprise that like someone like Warrington came unstuck in those sort of in that atmosphere, and just for Coley to do his world title, that it was sort of like the worst place to win a world title, if you know what I mean. And then to have his moment last night, okay, it wasn't a great opponent, but I do think there was some nice sort of signs of improvement from him. That's all you can ask. It's not doing much for him, fighting people like that, to be honest. It's not preparing him for a unification fight, but in those circumstances, with all that said, I thought it was decent.
Yeah,
I mean, it's completely ludicrous that he was number one with the WBO.
Of course, yeah.
He's probably, when I was doing the research and stuff for Sky, I think I wrote on the kind of like little synopsis I do for the fight that he had the worst resume of any mandatory challenger I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well, that's what I mean.
Well, of any mandatory.
But this is what I mean.
He
It's
gets
like,
some terrible voluntary.
he was actually he was kind of half decent. He was better than I expected.
compared to his resume.
Compared to what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
That's fair.
Coley
Right,
dealt with it.
moving on because we are very pushed for time here. Callum Smith returned to the ring, a chilling knockout of Lenin Castillo. So worth pointing out that Lenin Castillo was back at the team hotel last night. He is okay as you can be after a knockout like that. Ade, we're going to go to you first. Impressed with what we saw from Callum Smith in his light heavyweight debut? I mean, I'm assuming so.
Yeah, it's already crazy because he already looks too big for light heavy. Like, look at him. Think, how did you even make 168? He's a massive guy at 175, and look, that's some performance and some stoppage. Just because, yes, Castillo's had defeats, but I mean, Bivol put him down and he got up. Marcus Brown's a tough fight for him, but he sort of handled himself, and he lost on points, but he handled himself quite well just to survive. For Callum Smith to kind of knock on the door, 175 pounds, and say, look, I've arrived, I think he needed to put a dent in the kid, and he did. And Callum Smith's here at 175 pounds. I spoke to Buddy after, and I was like, and I spoke to Paul as well, like, what's the plan here? I mean, you guys are going to go straight for someone, and you're going to look at the British scene. They're like, no disrespect to the British scene, but we're ready to kind of go to kind of world level. That's it. We're not trying to, unless Boatsy gets a title, Boatsy fights Bivol, which isn't going to happen, then we'll go Boatsy, but we're ready to kind of fight anyone in that division. And you look at it and you think, Joe Smith? Like, you look at it
with Vlasov's now.
yeah, you
off.
think potentially, that's one that works. Obviously, I'm not quite sure about Beterbiev yet, but I like the Joe Smith fight. Look, Callum Smith's not going to wait around, is he? It's good division, great division.
Okay, right. We have not that much time left. So final one on the undercard last night. I do appreciate there's other fights that we're not going to touch upon. Campbell
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
I mean, it's just, it does no one any favours, including Campbell Hatton. It was one of the worst ones that we've seen. The ref scoring, it does always open up to that sort of thing. I said beforehand, I thought this was going to be a Cedric Payno moment. I thought that because this geezer turned up, Sonny Martinez turned up, he had a six-pack, he looked game. It
He
was
looked
like,
in shape,
yeah,
didn't
it
he?
was
I was
like,
like,
okay,
ooh.
this dude, he's a proper boxer. He's not just someone that they've found. What was he? One of the Spanish-based Nicaraguans. We've seen hundreds of them over the years, whatever. I was like, no, this is a proper fight for Campbell Hatton, who's very young, raw, green. Probably would never have turned pro if it wasn't for COVID. And he got the. I mean, you say he got the decision. You can't even say that. It was just concerning. More concerning, it's not a problem for a raw fighter like that to have a fight and not win a fight. Like, that's what's going to happen. He's had however many amateur bouts and he's straight in as a pro. that it happens on a stage like that in terms of that sort of result is just. I don't know what else we can say about it because constantly people are talking about it. You can just moan as much as you like. It just really just makes you sad now, doesn't it? That we're sort of all complicit in it as well because we all sort of expect it.
Yeah.
The decisions up tops, whether it be management company, Eddie, Ricky Campbell, Matthew, the decisions to put him so high up on these cards.
That's the mad bit.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, we've seen recently. We saw John Hedges have a real hard time on his professional debut. Seen him go and box on these DAZN shows away from the massive, intense media glare. Saw Dalton Smith box out in Austria a few weeks ago as well.
Perfect.
Why is Campbell Hatton not on those cards?
Yeah, Chris Eubank said the same thing on Sky last night. I caught the chat in between fights, and he was saying exactly that. He doesn't have to be fighting on this kind of stage because, like you say, it's not really doing him any favours. I think he came in I can't remember the initial opponent I was given on a card a couple of weeks ago, maybe, but it wasn't Sonny.
No, it was
Martinez.
Jura.
Ivan
Jura.
Isa Jura.
Isa Jura.
Yeah,
it was a different guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy came in quite late on, but yeah, I had it 5-1, and I thought I was being quite generous giving him the 1.
It wasn't a close fight, really. It wasn't, and it's a shame. And the thing, it's always like this. It's nothing against Campbell Hatton or the team.
Fault.
It's not his fault. It's that can happen. That score can just happen, and everyone questions it. But there's no consequence of any. All we hope is that when he gets back in the gym, they go, "We lost that fight. We need to do this."
Yeah, nobody's kidding him.
Nobody's kidding.
With the people involved,
it's not going to happen.
I think that they mean.
No, but even if
they know.
I think the wider discussion, even if they lost the fight, the wider discussion is where do you find opponents for Campbell Hatton? I mean, we say they're out there, but even if you fight a guy that's had 17 losses, the guy's had 17 pro fights. And he's just going to be a bit more experienced, a bit better than Campbell. Like when I'm watching Campbell, I'm trying to look for something. You know, like when you watch footballers and you look for something, step over. Okay, it's there. We can see it. I'm looking at Campbell. I'm looking for things that kind of give me confidence. Like, okay, in the next couple of fights, we might see a bit more than that. It's still so raw that every opponent he fights scares me, just because I feel like. Obviously, look, you're right, Dec, in the sense that if there wasn't COVID, he still would be an amateur. And you look at him and think, you still should be an amateur. You shouldn't be pro because there's hardly any experience there. And your name's putting you on the big stage, and it's just not fair. It's not fair for him as well. And he's a great kid. You speak to him, and all he wants to do is get better. Yeah. But they're running out of opponents and running out of excuses for him. And I think the best thing you can do is a next-gen type series to chuck him on that.
Yeah, that's kind of what you're alluding to. He needs to box every month. He needs to box every 2 months max. He can't be just wheeled up for pay-per-views. It's mad. And
he doesn't need to be boxing on I mean, I don't know what his contract is, but he doesn't need to. Why not have a fight on a small hall? I know the small hall has been kind of eviscerated in the last 18 months. Yeah, just fight. It doesn't matter. You don't need the cameras there. You don't need the press conference. You don't need all of that all the time. You need to develop your craft.
It's crazy. Yeah. Watching him come out after Callum Smith, I was like, this is absolutely mental. Yeah. Honestly,
Callum Smith, who went from boxing Canelo Alvarez to coming out before Campbell Hatton.
Yeah. Even Florian Marcoon, I don't know if we're going to talk about him. Even I saw him at the media workout. He was livid when he found out Campbell
He's always angry about something.
Campbell Hatton's in front of me. He was like, no, impossible.
Do you not know who my father is?
He was good, I thought.
Yeah.
Marcoon.
I thought he was good. I had it closer than you. I did have it closer than you.
Yeah, I know I could see that. I mean, I think Matt had it. Matt might have had it 9-1. I had it
9-1.
He might have done. I'm not totally sure, but I wasn't scoring it round by round myself, but I thought he won comfortably.
There were some close rounds that I think I obviously gave to Maxim Prodan and again,
it might have looked a little bit different right up close because
I think it did.
Quite a lot of what Prodan did just wasn't really effective, but he was always coming forward. And on TV, it is quite hard sometimes. And even if you're just a few rows back to work out what has landed and what hasn't. And Marku just jabbed his head off.
I thought it was really impressive.
That was the difference in the fight, I think.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
It almost felt as well you wanted another gear from Prodan, particularly down the stretch when he's like...
He didn't have one, did he?
And he had Marku hurt. I can't remember what round it was. He had that left hook that kind of made Marku buzzed him a little bit then. But we never saw the follow-up there. Right, guys, before we finish, just going to go around. I want you to try, if you can, and sum up Usyk, Joshua, with one word. Ade, Going to put
He's
you on
gonna
the
say my
spot
one.
first.
Masterful.
I was going to say masterclass.
I'll go for surgical.
Oh,
I'm going to go for majestic.
free.
Everyone just using the M's.
Yeah.
I was going to say masterclass.
Surgical, yeah.
Surgical,
Surgical's
very
good.
Very good.
Yeah, I'll swap mine actually. You
Can we just have
I'll
Andy?
swap mine for surgical. That's pretty good.
Right, but before we go, I just want to touch on something. In the last week, the online boxing community were rocked for the loss of Frankie Beckles, aka Pro B's of Pep Talk UK. It's very rare, and everybody here can attest to it, that somebody is universally well liked in the boxing circles. Always made time for everybody. Never had a bad word to say about anybody, and I never heard a bad word said about him. A really, really great guy, and will be sorely missed. So I just want to say, rest in peace to Frankie Beckles, Pro B's. My heart goes out to his family. Thanks very much for tuning in on the Boxing Social live show. Sorry to end on such a somber note. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and we'll catch you next time.